The Dursteel table, 300 pounds of compressed alloy, rose above his head like it weighed nothing. I'm talking about the kind of material they use in asteroid mining equipment, the stuff that takes industrial cutters to even scratch. And this human, this perfectly average-looking freight hauler in a worn gray jacket, held it overhead with the same casual ease you'd use to lift a serving tray. His face showed no strain, just that same too-calm expression he'd worn while sipping his water. The bar had gone silent, completely, utterly silent. Gorth was frozen, half-risen from his booth, his forearms locked mid-motion like someone had paused a holovid. Kelva's sensory tendrils had gone rigid, splayed out in the shock pattern I'd only seen twice before, both times right before someone died. Even Thrum, drunk as he was, had stopped mid-sentence, his glass tilted in nerveless fingers, the Bortaxian rum inside threatening to spill. Marcus's breathing stayed controlled, measured, the same rhythm as 30 seconds ago before he decided to destroy my furniture. Then he brought it down. The sound was like a meteor strike. That's not exaggeration. I've heard actual meteor impacts on station hulls during debris storms, and this was the same bone-deep percussion that makes your organs vibrate. The table split perfectly in half, the break so clean it looked intentional, like the manufacturer had designed a fold line into 300-pound slabs of industrial-grade Dursteel. Marcus set the two pieces down gently, precisely, like placing fragile cargo. He walked back to the bar, the sound of his boots on deck plating the only noise in the entire establishment. Sat down on the same stool, picked up his water glass, condensation still beating on the outside, because less than 40 seconds had passed since normal reality had ended. Took a sip. Set the glass down with that same careful force he'd used before. The tiny click of glass on bar surface might as well have been a gunshot. Sorry about the table, Rix. His voice was perfectly level, conversational, apologetic even. I'll pay for it, probably extra for the inconvenience. Call it 500 credits. Like he'd spilled a drink. Like furniture destruction was a minor paperwork issue. What happened next? Well, let's just say I learned why you never test someone drinking water. Stay close. 3 cycles earlier, I'd opened the evening shift convinced I'd seen everything the outer reach territories could throw at a bar owner. I was wrong. Let me back up. My name is Rex, the regulars call me Rix, and I own the Rusty Comet. Or I used to own the finest drinking establishment on Terminus Hub Station, back before I learned a lesson that cost me my favorite table, 2 perfectly good stools, and nearly my sanity. The station sits at the edge of civilized space, right where the proper shipping lanes give way to the lawless zones. We get all types. Smugglers drinking next to merchants. Mercenaries playing cards with miners. Species that would kill each other in core systems share tables here because out on the rim, credits matter more than grudges. I've broken up fights between Gorvan berserkers and Hectarian war veterans. I've handled situations that would make a core world security team resign on the spot. I know how to run a bar in rough territory, and I'm good at it. Or I thought I was. 3rd shift had just started, and the Comet was packed. Klandari smugglers occupied the corner booths, their forearms resting on tables in that aggressive posture their species favors. A group of Vorthax merchants clustered near the quantum poker tables, their sensory tendrils weaving conversation patterns I'd learned to read over the years. Hectarian miners were 3 rounds deep into their argument about optimal drilling angles, which meant another hour before someone threw a punch. Thrum sat at his usual spot, working through his 4th glass of Bortaxian rum. The old Boraxian miner was a regular, showed up most shifts, drank until philosophical, then stumbled back to his quarters muttering about the fundamental nature of reality. Harmless mostly, loud when provoked. The air smelled like a combination of species-specific alcohol, recycled station atmosphere, and that particular metallic tang that comes from being this close to the hull. Background noise was the usual 3rd shift symphony. Conversation in 6 different languages, the hum of quantum poker probability generators, the occasional clang from the kitchen where my cook was preparing something that passed for food. Normal, comfortable. The kind of controlled chaos I'd perfected over 8 years of bar ownership. The door cycled with its familiar hiss-thunk. Marcus Trent walked in looking like every other freight hauler I'd seen that month. Average height for a human, maybe 6 feet. Messy brown hair that hadn't seen proper grooming in weeks. Worn gray jacket over a shirt that had seen better days. Cargo pants with the kind of wear patterns you get from actual cargo work. Boots that had tracked through too many docking bays to count. Nothing special. Nothing threatening. I should have noticed his eyes. They were too calm. Predator calm. The kind of stillness that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of and having nothing left to prove. But I was busy restocking the Hectarian whiskey. They go through 3 bottles per shift when the mining quota discussions start, and by the time I looked up properly, he was already at the bar. "Water, please," he smiled, polite, tired in the way long-haul pilots get tired. "Cold if you've got it, room temperature is fine if not." All 3 of my eyes blinked in sequence. It's a Virilian thing, happens when we're genuinely surprised. When something breaks our pattern recognition badly enough that all 3 visual processors need to reset. I couldn't help it. "Water," I repeated, just to make sure I'd heard correctly. "Yes, please." I poured it from the purification tap, not the recycled station water. I keep the good stuff for species that can tell the difference, and something about the way he'd asked, polite, specific about temperature, suggested he'd notice. Minimal mineral content. Cold enough to form condensation on the glass immediately. Little beads of moisture started forming before I'd even set it down. Marcus accepted it with a nod, paid with a credit chip that looked well used, and took a long drink. His eyes closed briefly, like he was savoring it. "Now let me explain something about outer reach bars. People don't come here for water. They come to forget which star system they're in, to celebrate survival, to mourn lost crew, to seal deals that can't happen in monitored space. Ordering water in a place like the Rusty Comet is like walking into a weapons dealer's shop and asking for a hug. It's not against the rules exactly, but it misses the entire point of the establishment. The Rusty Comet exists because people need a place where nobody asks questions, where credits are the only language that matters, where you can sit next to someone whose species your homeworld is technically at war with, and as long as you both pay your tab, nobody cares. Water doesn't fit that equation. Water is what you drink when you're being careful, when you're staying sharp, when you're not here to forget. Marcus didn't seem to care about the unwritten rules. He settled onto his stool like he planned to stay a while, sipping his water with the same contentment most species reserved for expensive liquor. I went back to wiping down the bar surface, keeping one eye on the room the way you learn to do in this business. The Hectarian argument was getting louder but not dangerous yet. The Vorthax merchants were discussing shipping routes, their tendrils flickering in patterns that meant negotiation. Gorth, the Klandari crew leader, was nursing something purple and conducting what looked like a quiet business meeting with 2 Morphite brokers. Everything was fine. Then Thrum's voice cut through the ambient noise like a mining drill through soft rock. "Water. Someone's drinking water in a bar." The Boraxian's face had already shifted from its usual reddish tone toward purple, which meant he was working himself up to something. The philosophical phase of his drunk was ending, giving way to the confrontational phase. I'd seen it dozens of times. I caught Marcus's eye, gave him the universal bartender look that translates to "ignore the drunk. He'll pass out eventually." Marcus responded with a slight smile and another sip of his water. The condensation on the glass had formed a complete layer now, little droplets starting to run down the sides. Thrum wasn't done. He pushed himself up from his table with the exaggerated care of someone who knew they were drunk, but believed they were hiding it well. Swayed slightly. Focused with the intensity only the truly inebriated can manage. "You human, you're drinking water." "I am," Marcus agreed, his voice carrying that same polite patience you'd use with a child asking obvious questions. "Cold water, it's good." "In a bar?" "Yes." Several other patrons had stopped their conversations now. This was better entertainment than quantum poker, and everyone in the outer reaches knew humans were the new wild card in galactic politics. Dangerous, according to the news feeds. Unpredictable, fresh off a 3-year war with the Krell that had ended in a stalemate nobody expected. Kelva's tendrils twitched. Her species, the Vorthax, had predator detection instincts evolved from a homeworld where everything bigger than your thumb wanted to eat you. I saw her shift slightly away from Thrum's line of approach, putting another patron between herself and whatever was about to happen. I should have paid attention to that. Kelva's instincts were better than mine. Thrum gestured broadly, nearly knocking over his own drink. The Bortaxian rum sloshed but didn't spill, muscle memory from years of drunk gesturing. What kind of? What are you, some kind of delivery boy? Too good to drink with real spacers? Marcus took another sip before answering. Let the question hang there for a moment. When he spoke, his tone was mild, conversational. I prefer freight specialist, but sure, delivery boy works. A few scattered laughs from the crowd. Even drunk, people recognized a verbal counterpunch when they heard one. Freight specialist. Thrum made it sound like an insult, loaded it with all the contempt a Boraxian miner could muster for someone who hauled cargo instead of pulling ore from asteroids. What do you haul? Plush toys, medical supplies, baby formula. All of those, actually. Marcus kept his tone even, factual. Also industrial components, diplomatic packages, emergency rations, terraforming equipment, and once an entire monastery's worth of religious artifacts. That job was interesting. The monks had very specific temperature requirements. I found myself listening despite knowing I should probably intervene. There was something about the way Marcus spoke, like he was answering genuinely, providing real information instead of rising to the bait. Thrum blinked, thrown slightly off his rhythm. He'd expected anger or defensiveness, not a straightforward answer. Temperature requirements. The artifacts were apparently blessed at specific thermal ranges, had to maintain between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius for the entire journey, or the monks said the blessings would degrade. Marcus shrugged. I didn't ask too many questions. They paid well, and the temperature controls were easy enough to modify. How many planets you been to, freight specialist? The way Thrum said it, the title had become pure mockery. 217 planets, actually. Marcus didn't hesitate, like he'd counted recently. 53 space stations, including this one. 4 asteroid colonies, and 1 very uncomfortable week on a generation ship, where the recycling system had broken down. Someone in the back, one of the Hectarian miners, let out a low whistle. 217 was a lot of planets for someone who looked maybe 30 standard years old. 217. Thrum laughed, the sound wet and harsh. And you're still hauling cargo, must not be very good at it. I started calculating whether I could reach the stun baton under the bar before this escalated. Thrum was drunk, but Boraxians were stocky even by mining colony standards, with bone density that made them tough to take down. Marcus was, well, human, new to the galactic community, unknown quantity. I was betting on the wrong species, but I didn't know it yet. I'm good enough, Marcus said. His water glass made that tiny sound against the bar surface when he set it down. Precise. Controlled. The condensation left a small ring on the Dursteel bar top. Haven't lost a shipment yet. Haven't been boarded by pirates, I bet. Thrum was warming to his theme now, fueled by rum and an audience that was watching with interest. Haven't had to fight for your cargo. Just flying safe routes, delivering packages, collecting your credits like a good little freight specialist. Marcus adjusted his jacket cuff, straightening the worn fabric edge. A small, habitual gesture. 17 times, actually. The bar got quieter. Well, 17 attempted boardings, Marcus continued in that same conversational tone. Only 13 of those turned into actual fights. The other 4 times, they took one look at my ship's modifications and decided they had better things to do. Now everyone was listening. Even the Hectarian miners had paused their argument. Gorth, the Klandari crew leader I'd known for years, leaned forward with the kind of interest his species showed when they smelled a business opportunity. What kind of modifications? Marcus turned slightly on his stool, enough to address the room without making it confrontational. His movements were economical, precise. Standard defensive package for outer reach freight work. Welded mining laser, civilian grade. Nothing military, reinforced hull plating around the cargo bay and cockpit. Enhanced sensor array to spot trouble early. And a few surprise packages in the cargo bay that I don't advertise. Mining laser, Thrum snorted, civilian grade. It cuts through ship hulls just fine, Marcus said mildly. Which is all it needs to do. Pirates don't usually have military-grade armor. They use converted freighters, same as most of us. You ever actually use it? There was challenge in Thrum's voice now, disbelief mixing with the alcohol. 7 times. 3 warning shots that convince people to reconsider their life choices. 4 actual engagements. He paused, seemed to consider. Well, 3.5. The 4th one ended when my laser damaged their maneuvering thruster and they drifted into an asteroid. I didn't shoot them directly, so I'm not sure that counts as me killing them versus physics killing them. Kelva made a small noise. Her translator chip stuttered for a moment, struggling with the casual tone in which Marcus had just described lethal force. I was starting to reassess my threat evaluation. The water suddenly made more sense. Stay sharp. Stay ready. Never know when the next boarding attempt might come. But Thrum was too drunk for pattern recognition, too committed to his performance. You're making this up. Humans are all talk. Everyone knows that. You people got lucky against the Krell and now you walk around like you're dangerous. The temperature in the room dropped about 5 degrees. Several patrons who'd been leaning in suddenly leaned back. The Krell War was less than a year finished. The peace treaty still fresh enough that people were careful about mentioning it. The Krell had been the galactic boogeyman for 2 centuries, a warrior species that considered might the only virtue worth having, and the humans had fought them to a standstill. We didn't get lucky. For the first time, Marcus's tone changed. Not angry, colder, harder, factual in a way that allowed no argument. We survived because we're adaptable, because we don't give up, because we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's ours. Big words from someone drinking water. Thrum was committed now, riding the confrontation past the point where wisdom would have suggested retreat. I'm drinking water because I've got a delivery to make in 6 hours, and piloting a spacecraft through the debris field outside this station requires precision. Alcohol impairs precision, so I drink water. Marcus picked up his glass, examined it like it held answers to fundamental questions. That's not weakness. That's common sense. Prove it. Thrum spread his arms wide, an invitation or a challenge or both. You've got all these stories. 17 boarding attempts, modified ships, fighting pirates. Prove you're not just another human making up stories to sound tough. And there it was. The moment where talking ended and something else began. Marcus looked at Thrum for a long moment. 3 seconds, 5. His eyes had gone very still, very calm, like deep water. Then he turned to me. His eyes asked a question without words. Somehow I understood it perfectly, like we'd had this conversation before in another lifetime. Is this inevitable? Can I talk my way out? Or do I have to show them? I gave a small shrug. The bartender's eternal wisdom, learned over 8 years of managing violence in confined spaces. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Some people won't believe you until you show them. And Thrum had pushed past the point where words would work. Marcus nodded once. A tiny movement, almost imperceptible, like accepting an unpleasant job that still needed doing. He took one more sip of water, set the glass down with that same precise care, stood up. The bar held its breath. Marcus walked toward Gorth's table with measured steps, his boots making soft sounds against the deck plating. Not hurrying, not hesitating, just walking with purpose. Gorth watched with the kind of commercial interest his species was famous for, the calculating look that suggested he was already running numbers on whatever was about to happen. That table was his pride and joy, Dursteel, 300 pounds of compressed alloy, same material they used in asteroid mining frameworks. He'd bought it from a salvage dealer 2 years ago specifically, because it was indestructible, perfect for the kind of business discussions that sometimes involved knives, clubs, and the occasional small explosive. Nothing short of industrial cutting tools could damage that table. Everyone knew it. Gorth had proven it multiple times, usually when someone suggested it might be vulnerable to whatever new weapon they were selling. Marcus stopped beside it, put one hand on the edge, tested the weight. Kelva's tendrils went completely rigid, every one of them pointing straight out in the biological equivalent of a screamed warning. I opened my mouth to say something, stop him maybe, warn Gorth about the table, ask Marcus if he was sure. Too late. Marcus gripped the table edge with both hands, adjusted his stance. His breathing changed deeper, controlled, like he was preparing for heavy lifting. Then he lifted. The table rose, smooth, steady, like it weighed 30 pounds instead of 300. I heard someone's drink hit the floor. The sound of shattering glass seemed very loud. Marcus lifted the table above his head, his arms locked straight, holding 300 pounds of industrial-grade dursteel overhead like it was made of cheap plastic. His face showed concentration but not strain. His breathing stayed controlled. Thrum's face had gone from purple to a grayish color I'd never seen on a Boraxian before. That's dursteel, someone whispered. Might have been one of the Hectarian miners. You can't just lift dursteel. But Marcus was doing exactly that. He held it there for a moment, 2 seconds, 3, long enough for everyone to understand what they were seeing, long enough for the image to burn into memory. Then he brought it down. The impact sound wasn't just loud, it was physical. The kind of percussion you feel in your chest cavity, in your bones, in the deck plating under your feet. Every glass on every table rattled. The ambient station hum seemed to pause, like the structure itself was taking a breath. The table split. Clean, perfect. Like someone had planned the break line, engineered it into the molecular structure of 300 pounds of compressed dursteel alloy. Marcus set the two halves down with the same gentle precision he'd used to lift them, carefully, like they were fragile, like they mattered. Then he walked back to the bar. His breathing was still controlled, still measured, the same rhythm. If I hadn't just watched him destroy the most indestructible piece of furniture in the outer reaches, I'd never have known he'd exerted himself at all. He sat down on his stool, same position, picked up his water glass. The condensation had run down far enough that a small puddle had formed on the bar surface. He took a sip, swallowed, set the glass down with that precise, careful force. The tiny click of glass on dursteel was the only sound in the entire establishment. Sorry about the table, Rix. His voice was perfectly level, apologetic in the way you'd apologize for bumping someone's elbow. I'll pay for it, probably extra for the inconvenience. Call it 500 credits. I stared at him. All 3 of my eyes were open, locked, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. My brain was trying to reconcile polite freight hauler drinking water with casually destroyed industrial mining equipment with bare hands. The reconciliation wasn't going well. That's dursteel, I heard myself say, like he didn't know, like explaining the obvious would somehow make reality make sense again. I know. Marcus pulled a credit chip from his jacket pocket. 500 should cover it. If it costs more, let me know. I'll transfer the difference. Across the room, someone, one of the Hectarian miners, whispered, "Did that just happen?" "I saw it happen," his companion replied, "and I still don't believe it." Kelva had gone completely still. Her sensory tendrils were still rigid, still locked in that fear-response pattern. The sulfur vegetation smell that Vorthax produced when terrified was starting to permeate the air. Gorth was the first to speak at normal volume. He was still frozen in his half-risen position, his 4 arms locked at odd angles like someone had paused him mid-motion. His translator chip blinked twice, reset, then produced words. That was my table. I'll buy it from you, Marcus said, like they were negotiating cargo rates. What did you pay for it? 300 credits, from a salvage dealer. Gorth's voice had gone flat, mechanical, processing trauma through commercial transaction. But I've had it for 2 years. It's appreciated in value. 500 credits then. Marcus placed the chip on the bar. Rix, can you transfer 300 to Gorth for the table purchase? Keep 200 for the trouble and cleanup. I took the credit chip. It was warm from his pocket. My hands were shaking slightly. I've seen violence. I've broken up fights that left blood on my floors and dents in my walls. This wasn't violence exactly. This was demonstration. Controlled. Measured. Worse somehow. Sure, I managed. I'll transfer it now. Thrum hadn't moved. The Boraxian was still standing where he'd been when Marcus had walked away, his glass still tilted in nerveless fingers. The rum was dripping now, making a small puddle on the deck that he didn't seem to notice. His face had gone from that grayish color to something closer to pale green. You asked for proof, Marcus said. He wasn't looking at Thrum. He was looking at his water glass, watching the condensation reform on the surface. That's what happens when you make me prove something. I didn't want to. You insisted. Humans, someone breathed. Might have been Kelva. Her translator made it hard to tell. We're not looking for fights, Marcus continued, still in that mild, conversational tone. We don't go around breaking things just to prove we can. We just want to do our jobs, make our living, and go about our business in peace. He took another sip of water. The glass left another wet ring on the bar when he set it down. However, the word hung there for a moment. If you push us, if you insist on testing us, if you absolutely will not let us just sit quietly and drink our water in peace. He finally looked up, made eye contact with Thrum. Well, then you get exactly what you asked for. One of the Klandari smugglers started laughing. The sound was high-pitched, slightly hysterical. The Krell, he said. The Krell made them prove it too. The Krell did, Marcus agreed. What happened? Gorth asked. He'd finally managed to sit back down, though his eyes kept drifting to the broken table halves. In the war, what actually happened? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering whether to answer. You want the official version or the version that actually explains why the Krell agreed to a peace treaty? The real version, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Epsilon Station. Marcus turned his glass slowly, watching the water swirl. 3 years ago, the Krell sent a war fleet to take it. They considered it strategically valuable, positioned at the convergence of 6 major shipping routes. They expected minimal resistance. It was a civilian station, mostly commercial traffic. He paused, took another sip. The humans at Epsilon Station had exactly 3 military vessels. 3. The Krell fleet had 47 warships, including 6 destroyers and 2 dreadnoughts. By every tactical analysis, by every strategic calculation, Epsilon Station should have surrendered immediately. But you didn't, Kelva whispered. We didn't. Marcus's voice was flat, factual. The humans at Epsilon, they had maybe 200 trained soldiers. The rest were civilians. Freight haulers, miners, merchants, station maintenance workers. They had no military training, no combat experience, no business fighting a war. What did they do? One of the Hectarian miners asked. They used what they had. Cargo haulers became missile platforms, loaded their holds with explosives and rammed Krell ships. Mining lasers were repurposed as anti-ship weapons. Station maintenance crews welded armor plating to civilian shuttles and ran boarding actions. Escape pods were rigged with proximity charges and launched into the Krell formation. I found myself leaning forward, caught despite myself. And, Gorth prompted. The Krell lost 19 ships in the first week. 19. Marcus's tone didn't change. Including both dreadnoughts and 4 of the 6 destroyers. The humans lost 70% of their civilian population, but they kept fighting, kept adapting, kept finding new ways to hurt the Krell fleet with equipment that was never designed for combat. A captain named Tors, Marcus continued. She piloted a cargo hauler loaded with fusion cores straight into a Krell destroyer's engine section. Evacuated via escape pod at the last second. Survived. They named a ship after her later. Thrum made a small sound, almost a whimper. The war lasted 3 years across 12 systems. The Krell finally agreed to a peace treaty, not because they couldn't win. They had the numbers, the ships, the training. They agreed because they realized humans would never stop. We'd take 90% casualties, and the last 10% would jury-rig weapons from debris and keep fighting. We'd lose everything and still find a way to make it cost them more than they were willing to pay. The bar was completely silent now. So when you say humans got lucky against the Krell, Marcus looked at Thrum again, you're misunderstanding what happened. Luck didn't enter into it. We didn't bluff. We didn't exaggerate. We didn't threaten. We just acted. Quickly, decisively, effectively. With everything we had and some things we invented on the spot. He finished his water, set the empty glass down. That's what you need to understand about humans. We survived on a death world. We didn't get to be apex predators by being the strongest or the fastest. We got there by being stubborn, by adapting, by refusing to accept that anything was impossible just because it seemed impossible. I processed the payment transfer while his words settled over the room like radiation. 300 credits to Gorth, 200 to my account. The math was simple. The implications were terrifying. I'm sorry, Thrum said suddenly. The words came out slurred, broken. I shouldn't have. It's fine, Marcus's voice softened slightly. You were drunk, you didn't know, now you do. Are you going to kill me? The question was small, frightened. What? No, Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Why would I kill you? You were rude, not dangerous. I broke a table. We're even. The casual dismissal seemed to break something in Thrum. The Boraxian sat down heavily, his drink finally falling from his nerveless fingers. The glass shattered on the deck. He didn't seem to notice. Marcus stood up, placed a small tip on the bar, 50 credits, excessive for a glass of water, and nodded to me. Thank you for the drink, Rix. I'll be back in a few days if that's all right. You're leaving, I managed. I've got a delivery to make in 6 hours. Need to prep the ship. He smiled, tired but genuine. The water helped, I appreciate it. He walked toward the door with that same measured pace. Calm, controlled, like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. The door cycled, he was gone. The bar stayed silent for approximately 30 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. 3 days later, Marcus came back. I'd spent those 3 days replacing Gorth's table. Found a standard alloy version that looked similar but definitely wasn't Dursteel, and fielding questions from every patron who'd heard about the incident. Word had spread. The Rusty Comet had become famous for being the place where a human broke a Dursteel table with his bare hands because someone questioned his water order. Business was up 40%. I'd had to hire extra staff. When Marcus walked in on the evening of the 3rd day, the bar went quiet again. But this time it was different. Respectful. Wary. Like watching a dangerous animal that had proven it could be peaceful as long as you didn't provoke it. He wasn't alone. 2 other humans accompanied him. A woman with short red hair and a wiry build, and a man who looked barely old enough to drink. Both wore the same kind of worn cargo hauler gear Marcus favored. Water for me, Marcus said, settling onto the same stool. Riley Jame, what do you want? I'll try the Vorthax brandy, the woman Riley said. Her accent was different from Marcus's, sharper. Heard it's decent. Beer, the younger one, Jame requested. Whatever's local. I poured their drinks with hands that were steadier than 3 days ago. Marcus's water got the same treatment. Cold, purified, condensation forming immediately on the glass. Thanks, Rix. Marcus took a long drink, then smiled at his companions. This is the place I told you about. Where you broke the table, Riley said, amused. Where I had to break the table, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. They were settling in, starting to relax when Kelt walked in. I recognized him immediately. Gorvan bounty hunter, 8 feet tall, massive even by his species standards. Known for being efficient, brutal, and completely without mercy. His small eyes scanned the room, locked onto Marcus, and he started walking. Every other patron suddenly found somewhere else to be. Tables emptied. The Klandari smugglers left drinks unfinished. Kelva's tendrils flattened against her body in submission pattern. Kelt stopped 3 feet from Marcus's stool. You're human. I am, Marcus agreed. His tone was calm, but his body language had changed. Tighter ready. My brother died fighting for the Krell at Epsilon Station. Kelt's voice was low, dangerous. I'll break your fingers. Riley interrupted cheerfully. She hadn't moved from her stool, hadn't even put down her drink. Start with the left hand, work my way across. Probably won't kill you, but you'll never hold a weapon properly again. The casual delivery was somehow more threatening than any growl or threat display. Kelt's eyes shifted to her. You're serious? Very. Riley took a sip of brandy. My partner there broke a table because someone questioned his beverage choice. I'm significantly less patient than he is. Riley, Marcus said quietly. Just establishing parameters, she replied. Marcus turned on his stool to face Kelt properly. I'm sorry about your brother. The war was brutal. A lot of people died on both sides. You killed him. No, I wasn't at Epsilon Station. I was running freight in the Outer Rim during most of the war. Marcus's voice was steady, honest. But humans killed him, yes. Just like the Krell killed humans, that's what war is. You should decide whether revenge is worth what it's going to cost you, Marcus interrupted. Because if you start something here, right now, you're betting that you can take 3 humans in a confined space before we hurt you badly enough that you can't finish. Kelt was silent. My friend Riley already told you what she'll do. I'll be honest, I don't want to fight you. I came here to drink water and relax with my crew, but if you force me to, I will hurt you. Badly, efficiently, and I won't feel good about it afterward, but you'll still be hurt. The Gorvan's massive hands flexed, calculation happening behind those small eyes. Your brother fought for the Krell because that was his choice, Marcus continued. He was a warrior. Warriors understand risk. He knew humans were dangerous and he fought anyway because that's what honor demanded. Right. A slow nod. So honor his choice by making yours. Walk away, live your life, or try to hurt me and probably die in this bar for revenge that won't bring him back. Marcus's voice was gentle, almost kind. I know which choice he'd want you to make. Warriors respect other warriors. Your brother fought well. That's worth remembering. 30 seconds of silence. Then Kelt turned and walked out. The bar released a collective breath. You're getting soft, Riley said, though she was smiling. I'm getting tired of fighting, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The evening settled back into normalcy after that. Marcus and his crew stayed for 2 hours, drinking slowly, talking shop about cargo routes and fuel efficiency. Other patrons gradually returned to their tables, though they gave the humans a wider berth than they gave anyone else. A week later, Marcus won 3,000 credits at the quantum poker table, enough to buy a small shuttle. Gorth, who'd been in the game, said afterward that Marcus never bluffed. If he bet, he had the hand. Simple, honest, predictable in a way that somehow made him impossible to beat. He became a regular after that. Showed up every few weeks when his route brought him through Terminus Hub. Always ordered water. Always paid his tab plus a generous tip. Never caused trouble unless someone forced him to. The other species learned to leave him alone. Not because they feared him, though they did, but because he'd proven something more important than strength. Humans choose to be kind. They choose restraint. They choose peace when peace is an option. But when kindness runs out, when restraint is tested one time too many, when peace is no longer possible, they don't hesitate. They don't bluff. They don't warn. They act. And that's what makes them terrifying. Not the strength, not the stubbornness, not even the death world they came from. The choice. The conscious, deliberate choice to be gentle until gentleness fails. I learned to read it in Marcus over the following months. That perfect calm wasn't weakness. It was control, discipline, power held in check by will. The water wasn't a statement of timidity. It was a statement of priorities. Stay sharp, stay ready, because you never know when someone will make you prove what you're capable of. Sometimes late at night when the bar was quiet, I'd catch him sitting at his usual stool, water glass in hand, staring at nothing in particular. His crew would be elsewhere, Riley arm wrestling with miners, James charming the Vorthax merchants with improbable stories, and Marcus would just sit, still, calm. The water glass would catch the station lights, condensation beating on its surface the same way it had that first night. Clear liquid, room temperature precision, untouched except for the occasional sip. A symbol of restraint, of choice, of power that didn't need to prove itself unless you absolutely insisted. And in the outer reaches, on a station where violence was currency and strength was the only language most species understood, that quiet glass of water became the most respected thing in my bar. Just a human, just a cargo hauler trying to make his way in the galaxy. But underneath that, something more. Something that had survived a death world, fought a warrior species to a standstill, and still managed to be polite about ordering water in bars. The glass sits on the bar now, weeks later, same stool, same position. Marcus is talking to Riley about fuel costs, his voice low and measured. The condensation patterns form and reform on the glass surface, catching light, holding it. Nobody tests him anymore. Nobody asks him to prove anything. The water stays cold and untouched and peaceful, exactly the way he wants it.